Good morning and welcome to this morning's children's talk from Providence Baptist Church. We're continuing our stories of Paul the Apostle from the book of the Acts of the Apostles in our Bible bookcase. Now, before I get started, let me set the scene a little with an ancient legend. This legend concerns a Greek town in what is now Turkey called Lystra. It was told that the people of Lystra were visited by two of the pagan gods, Zeus and Hermes, but they were in disguise to see how the people of Lystra would receive visitors. Well, the people were not welcoming at all, except for two old folk who welcomed them into their home and gave them food and a bed for the night. The following day, Zeus and Hermes appeared to the people as their true selves, and they turned those unwelcoming townspeople into frogs. So now, on to Paul, who we've seen initially persecuting the church, but then being brought to faith by Jesus. Last week, we heard how Paul and Barnabas came to the island of Cyprus and travelled all through it, preaching the gospel. And they even appeared before the island governor, who came to faith. Then Paul and Barnabas sailed to the mainland, to Perga, and from there they made their way to Pisidian Antioch. Entering the synagogue, a sort of Jewish church building, Paul was invited to speak. So he started by recounting the history of the Jewish people, about how they had been blessed by God, with leaders who pointed the way to the promised Messiah. But when he came, the Jewish leaders had him executed by crucifixion. But God raised him from the dead. Paul went on to say, "Through Jesus, the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you, and everyone who believes is justified from everything that you could not be justified from by the law." Some of those who heard were pleased and believed, while others rejected the message and were angry. Paul and Barnabas then went to Iconium and then on to Lystra. Lystra, I've heard that name before. That's the place in the legend about the gods and the frogs. Paul was speaking to the people about Jesus, and then he noticed a man who was crippled in his legs. Paul looked at him and commanded him to stand up. When he did so, healed, the crowd went wild, believing Zeus and Hermes were there in disguise. Their pagan priest brought bulls to sacrifice to them. Paul and Barnabas cried out to them to abandon their worthless false gods and believe in the true God, who had made all things. Then some people from Pisidian Antioch came and stirred up the crowd against them, and they stoned Paul and thought they had killed him. But he survived, and he and Barnabas went on to the next city. We shall hear more of their story next week. Thank you for listening.